At 65, after burying my billionaire father, my husband asked me for a divorce. Not because he fell in love with someone else, not because the marriage was over, but because he wanted half my inheritance. And the quickest way to get it, dump me, marry the mistress he'd been keeping for years, and take me to court. 40 years of marriage were just a strategy for him to get his hands on the money that was finally mine. You know when you realize you spent your whole life being invisible to the man sleeping next to you, that every sacrifice, every year devoted to him and the kids, every time you swallowed your loneliness in silence, never meant a damn thing. I spent 40 years being the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman who held down the house while my husband built his career, never complained, never asked for recognition. And when I finally inherited millions from my father, a man who abandoned me as a child but who, ironically, remembered me in death, that's when the mask fell off. My name's Dorothy, I'm 65 years old, and this story started 6 months ago, on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was in the kitchen fixing lunch, like I always did, 'cause Marcus liked coming home for lunch between meetings at his law firm. The house smelled like fried chicken with roasted sweet potatoes, that recipe he'd always praise but never really thank me for, you know. It was one of those mornings when I felt particularly tired, not just in my body, but that soul-deep exhaustion of someone carrying the weight of a marriage that had long stopped being about love and became just about habit. I'd just gotten back from Charleston, South Carolina, where I'd spent 2 weeks handling my father's funeral arrangements and talking with lawyers about the inheritance. I was still grieving, still processing everything, but life doesn't stop, right? And Marcus certainly didn't stop. My father, well, that's an old wound that never quite healed. He abandoned us when I was just 8 years old, simply walked away, started over in Atlanta, and I grew up believing he was just another man who didn't want to take on the responsibilities of being a dad. My mother raised me and my sister alone, working as a maid and washerwoman in Orangeburg, a little town in the South Carolina countryside, going through hardships I'd rather not even think about. When I grew up, I swore I'd be different, that I'd build a solid family, a lasting marriage, that my kids would never feel the abandonment I felt. And look where that got me. I married Marcus at 25, an ambitious, charming lawyer who promised me security and stability. We had 2 kids, David, who's 38 now, and Lisa, who's 35. I spent 40 years being a housewife, taking care of them, the house, everything, while Marcus built his career. Never had a bank account of my own. Never worked outside the home after we got married, 'cause he said I didn't need to, that he made enough, that my place was taking care of the family. The news of my father's death came in such a weird way, so cold. A lawyer called saying that James Washington, that was his name, had died of a heart attack at 89, and that I was a beneficiary of his will. Right then, I felt this strange mix of anger, sadness, and even contempt. What do you mean he remembered me now, after he was dead? Where was he when I needed a father, when I got bullied at school for not having a father figure, when I got married and he didn't even know, when my kids were born and grew up without knowing their grandfather? But curiosity won out, and Marcus, always so interested in financial matters, insisted I go handle it in person. I could be a substantial inheritance, Dorothy, he said, with that gleam in his eye that I should have realized wasn't about me, but about the money. So I went alone, 'cause he said he couldn't leave the important cases at the firm. Now I get it. He didn't want to go, 'cause he was busy planning how to rip off what I didn't even know I had yet. When I got to Charleston and sat down in that fancy law office in the historic district, with a view of the harbor, I still had no idea what was coming. My father's lawyer, a black gentleman around 60 named Mr. Richardson, greeted me with a seriousness that made me even more nervous. He put a thick folder in front of me and said, "Mrs. Johnson, your father left you a considerable estate. We're talking about approximately $347 million in real estate, investments, and businesses." I remember just staring at him like I didn't understand, like he was speaking a different language. $347 million. My father, the man who abandoned us and never sent a dime in child support, was a billionaire, and he left it all to me. My sister Ruth was also included, but the bulk went to me because, according to the will, I was the oldest daughter and the one who suffered most from his absence. What bitter irony, huh? He knew he'd made us suffer, but he chose to make up for it with money after he was dead instead of being present in life. I got back home 3 days later, still trying to process everything. $347 million. I kept repeating that number in my head like it was a mantra I couldn't memorize. How does a woman who spent her whole life clipping coupons, saving on grocery shopping, wearing the same clothes for years, 'cause they're still good, suddenly become rich? No, not rich, a millionaire. The word felt ridiculous when I tried to say it out loud. Marcus picked me up at the Columbia airport on April 8th, a Wednesday I'll never forget. I remember he was more excited than usual, smiling too much, hugging me in a way he hadn't done in years. Before I even put my suitcase in the trunk, he was already asking, "So, how'd it go? What did he leave you?" I should have found all that excitement weird, that urgency, but I was so tired, so emotionally drained after 2 weeks dealing with a funeral, lawyers, and the strange guilt of crying for a father I barely knew. I just wanted to get home, take a hot bath, and sleep for days. "It was complicated," I replied, without going into details. He kept pushing the whole drive back to Orangeburg, asking questions about amounts, about how the money would be transferred, about taxes. Questions that at the time seemed natural to me. After all, he was a lawyer. He understood these things. But now, looking back, I can see what it really was. Him calculating, planning, measuring how much he could squeeze out of me. That night, sitting in the living room after dinner, I told Marcus everything. I talked about Mr. Richardson, about the will, about the $347 million, about how my father had built a real estate investment empire I didn't even know existed, about how he'd lived in Atlanta all those years less than 4 hours away, rich, successful, and had never tried to get in touch. Marcus went quiet for a few seconds that felt like forever, just looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read at the time. His eyes had that strange gleam like he was doing mental math. Then he got up slowly, came over to me, hugged me, and said in a voice that seemed sincere, "Dorothy, this is incredible. You deserve this. After everything your father did, at least he had the conscience to try and make up for it." He even kissed my forehead, a gesture of affection I hadn't gotten from him in so long it almost made me cry. For the first time in years, I felt like he really cared about me, that we were truly together, that maybe that money could even bring back what we'd lost along the way. What a silly delusion on my part. The next few days were the strangest of my life. Marcus suddenly became super attentive, almost unrecognizable. He'd bring me coffee in bed every morning, something he hadn't done since the first month of marriage. He'd ask how I was feeling, if I'd slept well, if I needed anything. He'd suggest we go out to dinner, something we hadn't done in at least 5 years, 'cause he always said he was too tired, too busy. He even canceled some appointments at the firm to stay home with me. "You've been through a lot, honey. You need support right now," he'd say, holding my hand the way he used to when we were dating. And I, God forgive me, believed him. I believed that after 40 years, our marriage was finally getting back that connection we had in the beginning, that bond I thought I'd lost forever. I even felt guilty for spending so much time thinking Marcus was cold and distant. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, I'd think, as he hugged me on the couch watching TV. Maybe he always cared, and I was just too blind to see it. But there was something in his eyes I couldn't understand, an intensity that wasn't exactly love, but I didn't know what to call it. He'd ask questions about the inheritance constantly, disguised as concern. Have you thought about how you're going to invest that money? We need to talk to an accountant. Did you sign all the transfer papers? At the time, I thought he was being helpful, careful. Only later did I understand he was mapping out every penny, planning every move. 2 weeks after I got back from Charleston, exactly on April 22nd, a Saturday, Marcus suggested we throw a party to celebrate. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when he came downstairs already dressed, with that broad smile I hadn't seen in years. Dorothy, I was thinking, we should have a party, get our friends together, family. It's been a while since we've done that. I frowned, surprised. Celebrate what? He came over to me, took my hands. Life, Dorothy. We've got so much to be grateful for. Your 65th birthday that passed in March, our family, and now this blessing your father left. Let's do a nice barbecue in the backyard. Invite everyone we care about. I thought it was strange, 'cause Marcus was never really into hosting parties at home. He always preferred events at clubs, restaurants, places where he didn't have to worry about preparations. But I agreed because, honestly, the idea of seeing friends, taking my mind off things a bit, seemed good. I'd spent weeks buried in paperwork, in painful memories of my father, in practical questions about money I didn't even know how to handle. A party seemed normal, a return to normalcy. He insisted on handling everything, called our friends, hired the barbecue people, bought drinks, set up tables and chairs in the backyard. I just needed to show up looking pretty, as he said with a smile that at the time seemed caring, but now makes me feel sick when I remember it. The party was set for the following Saturday, April 29th. In the days leading up to it, Marcus was strangely excited. He'd whistle around the house, something he never did. He'd crack jokes at dinner. He was even affectionate with the kids when they called, asking about their lives in a way that seemed genuine. I remember thinking, could the money really change our life for the better? Could we have a fresh start at 65? I'd even bought a new dress, light blue, 'cause I wanted to look pretty. I wanted that day to mark a new beginning for us. On the day of the party, I woke up early and spent hours getting ready. Ruth called in the morning asking if I needed help, and I said no, that Marcus had taken care of everything. She thought it was weird. My sister always had a sixth sense for these things, but didn't push it. Okay, but if you need anything, you call me, you hear? I promised I would, not knowing that in a few hours I'd be calling her from an empty parking lot in tears, asking for a place to sleep. The party started at 3 in the afternoon. About 30 guests came, colleagues from Marcus's firm, some neighbors, my sister Ruth with her husband, and our kids David and Lisa with their spouses. The backyard was packed, everyone talking, laughing, eating. Marcus was beaming, going from group to group, telling jokes, serving drinks, being the perfect host. I watched it all with a smile on my face, but inside I felt out of place, like I was watching a play where everyone knew the script except me. There was something strange in the air, a tension I couldn't identify but that made my stomach turn. People were looking at me differently, like they were waiting for something to happen. Some would look away when I tried to talk. Others hugged me with a strange intensity, almost like they were saying goodbye. Or maybe it was just in my head. I tried to convince myself. Maybe it was just paranoia from dealing with so much money suddenly. Around 5 in the afternoon, when the sun was starting to set and the backyard was bathed in that golden late afternoon light, Marcus asked for everyone's attention. He tapped a glass with a knife, and the sound echoed through the yard, silencing conversations. Everyone, everyone, can I have your attention for a minute? Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. Marcus was standing on the wooden deck he'd built himself 10 years ago, with that broad smile I knew so well, or at least thought I knew. I wanted to thank you all for being here today. Family, friends, you mean so much to me and Dorothy. He paused, looked at me, and in that second, I saw something in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't love, it wasn't affection, it was triumph. Today's a special day, a day of changes. My heart started beating faster. Changes? What changes? I looked around for some clue in people's faces, but all I saw were lowered eyes, discomfort. Some people even seemed to be bracing themselves for a show they knew was coming. Dorothy, he called me, extending his hand as if inviting me to dance. Come here, honey. I walked over to him, kind of confused, with everyone watching, and each step felt heavier than the last. When I got close, Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. A white envelope, large. The kind lawyers use for important documents. The kind he used at the office. I wanted to do this in a respectful way. In front of the people we love, he said, still smiling, but it was a different smile now. Cold, calculated. A smile I'd never seen on him in 40 years of marriage. Dorothy, I'm asking for a divorce. These are the papers. They're all filled out. Just need your signature. The world stopped. I swear I felt the ground disappear from under my feet, felt my heart stop for a second before racing like I was having a heart attack. I just stared at that envelope, at Marcus, at the people around us, trying to figure out if this was real or if I was having some kind of nervous breakdown. What was all I could manage to say, and my voice came out so weak, so shaky, I barely recognized it as mine. Marcus continued with that plastic smile, that calm lawyer voice explaining a contract. I know it's a shock, but believe me, it's best for both of us. We've drifted apart, Dorothy. Doesn't make sense to keep living a lie. You deserve to be happy, and so do I. I was still processing, still trying to make my brain understand the words he was saying when he continued. And there's something else you need to know. I'm with someone for 4 years now. Her name's Vanessa, and I love her. We want to get married as soon as the divorce goes through. He pointed to a woman standing near the grill, and only then did I notice she'd arrived alone, without a date. A white woman, blonde, around 40-something, in a blue dress almost identical to mine. She waved at me with an awkward little smile, like we were being introduced at a regular party, like she hadn't just destroyed 40 years of my life. 4 years. He'd been cheating on me for 4 years, and I didn't know, or worse, I didn't want to see. How many times had she been in my house? How many times had they laughed at me behind my back? I looked around for support, looking for someone who was as shocked as I was, but what I saw destroyed me even more. My daughter Lisa was looking at the ground, holding her husband's hand so tight her knuckles were white, without the courage to look at me. My son David had his arms crossed, jaw clenched, face red, clearly uncomfortable, and this was what hurt the most, not surprised. Not surprised. They knew, my own kids knew, and never told me. Ruth, my sister, had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide, tears already starting to fall. At least she looked genuinely shocked, but Marcus's friends, his colleagues from the firm, some just stood there with expressions that were too neutral, too professional. Others didn't even hide their discomfort, looking at their own shoes like they wanted to be anywhere else. And there were 2 or 3 who seemed to be entertained, like this was a show. Just sign it, Dorothy, Marcus said, pushing the envelope toward me with a casual familiarity that made me feel even more humiliated, like he was asking me to sign a birthday card, not the papers that would destroy my marriage. No need to complicate things. It's an amicable separation. You keep your inheritance, I keep what's mine, and we each go our separate ways. Simple as that. That's when I got it. The clarity came like a punch to the gut. He wasn't asking for a divorce because he found the love of his life. He was asking for a divorce because he knew that if we stayed married, he'd be entitled to half my inheritance under marital property division law. But if he divorced me now, before the money was really integrated into our joint finances, if I signed those papers agreeing that each of us kept what was ours, he wouldn't be entitled to any of my father's money. It was a setup, a coldly calculated setup, executed in front of everyone to pressure me into signing without thinking, without questioning, without fighting back. He'd even chosen to do it at a party, with drinks, with people, so I'd feel pressured not to make a scene, to accept quietly like I'd always accepted everything in life. My hands were shaking when I took the envelope. I opened it and saw the divorce papers. All those clauses in legalese that he knew I wouldn't fully understand. And right there in the middle, in letters that seemed to scream at me, complete separation of assets. Each party retains their individual property acquired before, Taya, during Itza, and after marriage. Marcus had orchestrated everything down to the smallest detail. He knew that if he did this in private, I'd have time to think, to hire a lawyer, to question every line of that document. But doing it there, in front of everyone, in front of my kids, our friends, he was betting I'd want to end that public humiliation quickly, sign anything just to get out of there and disappear. And the truth, for a second, I really thought about doing exactly that. Signing, getting it over with, running inside the house, locking myself in my room and never coming out, letting him have what he wanted, leaving everyone in peace, disappearing from everyone's lives who clearly didn't want me there. But then, I looked at Vanessa again, that woman who was smiling like she just won the lottery, wearing a dress almost identical to mine, like it was a message, a trophy, a replacement, and something inside me shifted. A rage I'd never felt before in my life started rising up my throat, hot, suffocating, powerful. 40 years of my life I'd given to that man, 40 years taking care of his house, raising his kids, washing his clothes, cooking for him, listening to his stories, supporting his dreams, being invisible so he could shine. And he thought he could discard me like that, in front of everyone. Like I was old furniture he got tired of seeing in the living room. I tore up the papers. I tore them up real slow, holding his gaze, ripping each page with a calmness I didn't know I had, and threw the pieces on the ground at his feet like bitter confetti. The silence that fell over the backyard was so heavy I could hear my heart beating in my ears. You want a divorce, Marcus? Then you're going to have to fight for it. And you can bet on one thing. When I'm done, you're going to give me half of everything we built in these 40 years. The house, the firm, the savings, the investments, everything. And as for your mistress there, I turned to Vanessa and she took a step back like I was going to physically attack her. I hope you like broke men, because that's what he's going to be when I'm done with him. The silence exploded into noise. Marcus turned red, the veins in his neck bulging, fists clenched. You can't do that, he yelled. And for the first time in 40 years, I saw him completely lose his composure. That money's yours. It's got nothing to do with me. You've got no right to anything that's mine. I took a step forward, and he took a step back. It was the first time in my life I'd seen fear in his eyes. Exactly, Marcus. It's my money, But our marriage, our house, your firm that I helped build while taking care of your kids and your house for 40 years, that's ours. And you're gonna pay for every lie, every betrayal, every second you made me feel like I didn't exist. I grabbed my purse from the table and my hands were still shaking, but my voice was steady. Oh, and Marcus, thanks for the party. It was very enlightening. I left that backyard without looking back, ignoring Lisa calling me, ignoring Ruth running after me. I got in the car, the only car in my name, an old 2010 Honda I used for grocery shopping, and drove with no destination, the tears finally falling, blurring my vision, my whole body shaking with rage and pain, and something else it took me a while to recognize, relief, a strange and disturbing relief at finally seeing the truth, finally understanding I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined his coldness all those years. I stopped in an empty parking lot near the Methodist church where I used to go with my mother when I was a kid, the same church where I'd married Marcus 40 years ago, on a sunny June day when I thought I was starting my real life. And there, alone inside the car as night fell over Orangeburg, I finally let it all out. I cried for the woman I'd been, for the life I'd wasted, for the years I'd never get back. I cried for my kids who chose their father's side. I cried for 25-year-old Dorothy who thought love and dedication would be enough. But in the middle of those tears, a certainty started growing inside me, hard and sharp as broken glass. Marcus Johnson had just woken up a woman he'd never known, a woman he'd kept asleep for 40 years with empty promises and crumbs of affection, and he was going to regret it for the rest of his life. I called Ruth. She answered before the first ring finished. "Dorothy, where are you?" "I'm worried. Everyone here is—" "Can I sleep at your place tonight?" I interrupted, my voice still shaky but determined. "I can't go back home. Not yet." I heard her say something to her husband, then she came back to the phone. "Of course you can. Stay as long as you need. The spare key's still in the same plate. You can go straight there. I'm coming right now." I drove to Ruth's house on the other side of town, let myself in with the key she kept under the flower pot on the porch, and locked myself in the guest room, that little room that smelled like lavender and had a patchwork quilt my mother had made years ago. I lay down on that bed, still in my dress, still in my shoes, and stared at the ceiling. Marcus Johnson had planned everything. He'd chosen the moment, the place, the witnesses. He'd turned my marriage into a public performance of humiliation. But he'd made one mistake. One fatal mistake. He'd assumed I was going to keep being that quiet, obedient, invisible Dorothy. And he had no idea how wrong he was. I spent that whole night awake in Ruth's guest room. I couldn't go back home, couldn't face Marcos, couldn't even close my eyes without seeing that cold smile of his, that white envelope, Vanessa waving at me like we were friends. I lay there staring at the ceiling in that small room that smelled like lavender, hearing the living room clock strike the hours one by one until the sun came up. My sister took me in without asking questions, just hugged me at the door when she got there and said, "You can stay here as long as you need." And then left me alone with my thoughts, 'cause she knew that's what I needed. The next morning, Sunday, I called Lisa. I needed to understand. I needed to hear from her own mouth how my own daughter had known and not told me. She answered on the third ring, her voice low, almost embarrassed. "Mom," she started, but I cut her off. "You knew." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Silence on the other end, then a deep sigh. One of those sighs you give when you know there's no way out of the conversation. "Mom, we didn't want to hurt you. Dad said he was going to handle it, that he was going to break it off with her, that he was just waiting for the right time." I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, with no joy in it at all. The right time. And when would that be, Lisa? When I was dead. I heard her choke up on the other end, start crying. It wasn't like that, Mom. He said he was waiting for us to grow up so it wouldn't affect us. And then he said you guys had an arrangement, that the marriage had just been for show for years now. I felt my stomach turn. Arrangement? What arrangement? Lisa, I need to know. How long have you known? More silence. Then, very quietly, like she was ashamed to admit it, about 2.5 years, since that Christmas when you two barely spoke at dinner. 2.5 years. My daughter had known for 2.5 years that her father was cheating on me and didn't tell me, didn't pull me aside, didn't whisper a warning, didn't do anything. And David, he's known longer, about 3 years. He saw Dad with her at a restaurant in Colombia once. He confronted Dad, and Dad said that you knew, that you guys had talked about it. That it was an adult, mature arrangement between two people who didn't love each other anymore but wanted to keep the family together. Every word was a stab. And you believed him. You really believed that I, who spent my whole life taking care of this family, would be okay with your father having a mistress. We didn't know what to believe, she exploded, her voice rising. You never said anything, Mom. You always seemed content. Always said everything was fine when we asked. How were we supposed to know you were suffering if you never said anything? That left me speechless for a second. Was she right? Had I been so good at hiding, at pretending, at being the perfect wife, that even my own kids believed the lie? You're my children, I finally said, my voice shaking. You should have come talk to me, not him. Should have given me a chance to tell my side before accepting his. I hung up before she could say anything else. Not because I was mad at her. Well, I was, but it wasn't just that. It was because if I kept up that conversation, I was going to fall apart completely. And I couldn't fall apart now. I needed to be strong. I needed to think clearly. Marcus had built this whole narrative for our kids. A story where I was the complacent wife, the woman who didn't care anymore, who was comfortable in her little housewife life. And they'd believed it, 'cause I never gave them reason to doubt, 'cause I'd always been so good at swallowing the pain, at smiling even when I was bleeding inside. Ruth came into the room with a cup of coffee and toast. You need to eat something, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I took the coffee but couldn't touch the food. My sister just looked at me with that worried expression. Same as when we were kids and I'd cry in secret, 'cause I missed our father. Dorothy, what are you going to do? I looked at her and, for the first time since yesterday, felt absolute clarity. I'm going to hire the best divorce lawyer I can find. And I'm going to make Marcos pay for every penny he thinks he's going to save by dumping me now. Monday morning, May the 1st, I was sitting in the office of Mrs. Patricia Hayes, a lawyer from Colombia who had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. Ruth had given me her name, saying a friend from church had used her services and been impressed. The office was small but elegant, with diplomas on the walls and a bookshelf full of law books. Mrs. Hayes was a black woman around 50-something, gray hair cut real short, red-framed glasses, and a look that seemed to see right through people to their souls. I told her everything. The 40 years of marriage, the inheritance, the party, Vanessa, the papers Marcus wanted me to sign, my kids knowing and not telling me. She took notes on a yellow pad, showing no emotion, just nodding occasionally for me to continue. When I finished talking, she took off her glasses, cleaned the lenses calmly, put them back on, and looked me straight in the eyes. Mrs. Johnson, she said, her voice firm and professional, your husband made a very big strategic mistake. I frowned. What do you mean? She leaned forward, hands folded on the desk. He exposed the infidelity publicly, in front of witnesses. Witnesses who can testify under oath about what they saw. That alone gives us a huge advantage in any divorce proceeding. But what he really didn't think through was the timing. You're still married under the community property regime. In South Carolina, that means everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50 in divorce. And that includes the appreciation of his law firm over these 40 years. I felt a twinge of satisfaction mixed with nervousness. "No, so he's going to have to give me half the firm." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and loved every second of it. "If we play our cards right, yes. The firm was opened 32 years ago, correct? During your marriage. You didn't work there directly, but your contribution was fundamental. You took care of the house, raised the kids, allowed him to focus entirely on his career. That has legal value. Plus, we can ask for compensation for emotional distress from the public humiliation." Over the next few days, Mrs. Hayes worked fast. She had me sign a power of attorney, gathered marriage documents, bank statements from recent years that Marcus kept and I'd never paid much attention to. On May 8th, exactly a week after our first meeting, we filed a response to the divorce petition Marcus had made official right after the party. We requested division of all assets acquired during the marriage, including 50% of the market value of the law firm, 50% of joint savings and investments, the house we lived in, which was in his name but had been bought during the marriage, with money earned during the marriage, and compensation for emotional distress in the amount of $2 million for public humiliation and infidelity proven by witnesses. Marcus got served on a Thursday. I know. 'Cause he called me at 10:23 in the morning. I remember the exact time. 'Cause I was looking at Ruth's kitchen clock when the phone rang. He was yelling, his voice so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Are you insane, Dorothy? Emotional distress, half the firm. You're gonna bankrupt me. You're gonna destroy everything I built." I kept my voice calm, calmer than I felt inside. "No, Marcus. You bankrupted yourself when you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. Now deal with the consequences." He changed tactics, his voice getting lower, trying to sound reasonable, conciliatory. "Look, Dorothy, we can talk about this like adults. Doesn't have to be this way. I know you're hurt, but this isn't going to bring anything good for anyone. Think about our kids, the grandkids." "Hurt?" I interrupted, and now my voice had a coldness I didn't know existed in me. "Hurt is when someone forgets my birthday, Marcus. What you did to me was way worse than that. You cheated on me for 4 years, got our kids involved in the lie, and still thought you could throw me out like trash in front of everyone. So no, we're not gonna talk. My lawyer's gonna talk to your lawyer, and I'll see you in court." I hung up before he could respond, and my hands were shaking so much I dropped the phone on the table. But it wasn't fear. It was pure adrenaline. For the first time in 40 years, I was facing Marcus as an equal, and for the first time, he was truly scared. The divorce process dragged on through the following months. May turned into June, June turned into July, and each week brought a new round of papers being exchanged between lawyers, of Marcus trying every possible strategy to make me give up. First he tried intimidation, sending messages saying I was making a mistake, that I'd regret it, that he had judge friends, that I had no idea who I was messing with. When that didn't work, he went for the guilt card. He'd call late at night saying I was destroying the family, that the grandkids would grow up without seeing their grandparents together, that I was being selfish and vindictive, and when guilt didn't work either, he went on the public attack. Orangeburg's a small town, one of those places where everybody knows everybody, and secrets last less than ice cream in the sun. Within weeks, the comments started. At the supermarket, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been my neighbor for 15 years, switched aisles when she saw me. At the pharmacy, I heard 2 women whispering behind me while I waited in line. Poor Marcus, married 40 years and now she wants every last penny. The inheritance went to her head. I turned and stared at both of them until they turned red and hurried out. But inside, it hurt. It hurt knowing he'd managed to flip the narrative, make me the villain. At church, where I'd gone every Sunday for 30 years, people greeted me with that fake little smile, full of pity or judgment, impossible to tell which. Some hugged me with strange intensity, saying, "We're praying for you," in a tone that made it clear they were praying for me to come to my senses and stop this craziness. Marcus had spread all over town that the inheritance had changed me, that I'd become greedy, obsessed with money, that I wasn't the Dorothy everyone knew anymore. And the worst part, a lot of people believed it. Mrs. Hayes told me to ignore it. "Let 'em talk, Dorothy," she said in one of our weekly meetings. Small town gossip. When this case goes to court and the facts come out, those same people will be embarrassed by what they said. But it was easy for her to say. She didn't live in Orangeburg, didn't have to face those looks every day, didn't have to hear the whispers that stopped when I walked into a room. I seriously thought about moving, going to Charleston or Columbia, starting a new life where nobody knew me. But something inside me refused to run. Why should I have to hide? I hadn't done anything wrong. Marcus was the one who should feel ashamed, not me. At the end of June, Lisa showed up at Ruth's house without warning. It had been almost a month since we'd talked, since that tense phone conversation the day after the party. She walked into the kitchen where I was having coffee with Ruth, with that look of someone who'd rehearsed a speech but was still unsure. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, and her voice had an urgency that scared me. Ruth discreetly left, leaving us alone. "It's about Dad," Lisa started, sitting heavily in the chair like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. He's not doing well, Mom. The firm's doing badly because of the lawsuit. He had to fire the secretary and the intern. Some clients canceled their contracts, 'cause they don't want to get involved in Bob's personal drama. That's what they said. And he's drinking a lot. He comes home late, sometimes doesn't come home at all. David's worried. I felt a twinge of something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but wasn't compassion either. It was more like validation. He was finally facing consequences. "And you came here to ask me to drop the lawsuit?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Lisa looked down, fidgeting with her hands. "I came to ask you to consider a settlement. It doesn't have to be this way. Mom, you two can sit down, talk like adults, divide things fairly without destroying each other." I got up and went to the window, looking at Ruth's small garden, where she'd planted yellow roses that were starting to bloom. "Lisa, answer me something. Do you know how many nights I stayed up when you were sick? How many times I dropped everything to pick you up from school, take you to the doctor, help you with homework? Do you remember how many birthdays, performances, graduations I organized alone? 'Cause your father was busy building the family's future?" "I know, Mom, but—" "No, you don't know," I interrupted, turning to look at her. "You know factually, but you don't know. Don't know what it's like to give up your dreams, your identity, everything you wanted to be, to just be someone's wife, someone's mother." I was going to study nursing, Lisa. I'd gotten a partial scholarship, but your father said I didn't need to, that he'd take care of everything, that my place was at home, and I believed him. Lisa was crying now. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Vanessa, for believing Dad, for not giving you the benefit of the doubt. But please, think about what you're doing. The firm is everything he has. If you take half, he's going to have to sell. He'll lose everything." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that decision, and the 40 years of my life that I devoted to him. That's worth nothing. You think it's fair that I walk away from this marriage with nothing but my father's inheritance, which, by the way, has nothing to do with your father. But you have the inheritance, she argued, and I heard the echo of Marcus's words in her. You're set now. You don't need Dad's money. That was the last straw. Lisa, this inheritance is mine, from my father, who abandoned me but at least had some remorse at the end. It has absolutely nothing to do with your father. What I'm asking for is what belongs to me by right, for the time I devoted to this marriage, for the career I abandoned, for the life I lived in service to him. If you can't understand that, if you think I should just accept being cheated on and humiliated and still walk away empty-handed, then honestly, I don't know what else to say to you. She left crying, and I stood there in Ruth's kitchen, my own tears falling silently. I was losing my daughter, or maybe I'd already lost her a long time ago and was just realizing it now. Ruth came back minutes later and found me sitting on the floor, leaning against the cabinet, sobbing. She didn't say anything, just sat down next to me and held my hand. A week later, in early July, something happened that changed everything. Mrs. Hayes called me urgently in a tone I'd never heard from her, excitement mixed with anger. Dorothy, I need you to come to the office immediately, now. I've got something you need to see. When I got there, 40 minutes later, she had her laptop turned toward me before I even sat down. Look at this. On the screen were emails, dozens of them, between Marcus and Vanessa, dated from 2021, 4 years ago, not 3 like he'd said at the party. And the content, God, the content made me physically sick. They weren't just declarations of love, though there was plenty of that too. It was how they talked about me. Can't wait to get rid of her, said an email from Marcus from 6 months ago, November 2024. As soon as she gets her father's inheritance, I'm asking for divorce. I'll finally have a real life with you, without that woman demanding my attention all the time. But even worse were the more recent emails from May, after I contested the divorce. Marcus and Vanessa discussing strategies to discredit me. I'll say in court that she changed after the inheritance, he wrote, that she got paranoid, emotionally unstable. I can get some people to confirm that. She's always been kind of fragile. Won't be hard to convince the judge that the money affected her head. Vanessa replied, what about the kids? Can they testify? Marcus, I'm working on it. David's already half convinced. Lisa's harder, but she'll give in. I had to run to Mrs. Hayes' office bathroom. I threw up everything in my stomach, then stayed there, kneeling on the cold floor, shaking. When I came back, she had a glass of water waiting for me. How'd you get these emails? I asked, my voice hoarse. She hesitated, then said, let's just say the secretary Marcus fired wasn't very happy, and that she had access to his email backups. It wasn't exactly legal, but I was beyond caring about technicalities at that moment. Dorothy, Mrs. Hayes said, taking my hands and making me look at her. With this, we don't just win the case, we crush him. This proves conspiracy to commit procedural fraud, attempted witness tampering, defamation. We can increase the emotional distress claim to $5 million. I looked at those emails on the screen, at those poisonous words about me written by the man I'd shared a bed with for 40 years, and something inside me broke definitively. It wasn't anger. It was an icy coldness, a steel determination. Use everything, I said. Every word. I want him to pay for everything. 2 days after seeing the emails, Mrs. Hayes filed a revised petition, including the evidence and increasing the compensation request to $5 million. Marcos got served on a Friday morning. At 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was him, but he wasn't yelling. He was crying. How'd you get these? His voice broken, almost unrecognizable. Dorothy, please, can we talk? I know I messed up. I know I went too far. But this is going to destroy me completely. For the first time in 40 years, I heard real desperation in his voice. Not controlled anger, not careful manipulation, genuine desperation. And I felt nothing. You should have thought about that before, I replied calmly. You've got two options, Marcus. Accept my terms for a settlement, or we take this to public court and all of Orangeburg will read those emails. Your choice. Silence. Then, what do you want? I'll have my lawyer send you the full list. But in short, 60% of the firm, the house, half of all savings and investments, and $3 million in damages. Non-negotiable. I heard him breathing on the other end, irregular, heavy. Fine, he finally said. But I want to include a clause about future inheritances. My blood ran cold. What clause? That neither of us has rights to what the other inherits after the divorce, future inheritances, unexpected gains, anything. I want that in the agreement. Something in his tone alerted me. Why did he care about this? Why? My mother doesn't have money, Marcus. You know that. Just want to protect both of us. It's standard in divorces like this. But it wasn't standard, and we both knew it. I agreed to think about it, hung up, and immediately called Mrs. Hayes. He knows something, she said as soon as I told her. He wouldn't put that clause in for nothing. Dorothy, is there an inheritance expectation you haven't told me about? No, my mother's alive but has practically nothing. My father was an only child. You sure about that? I went silent, thinking, did my father have siblings? My mother had never mentioned. Oh, leave it to me, Mrs. Hayes said. I'll hire an investigator. 3 days later, the bomb dropped. Mrs. Hayes called me at 10 at night. Dorothy, sit down. Your father had a brother, Harold Washington, lives in New York, and he's dying of cancer. My heart raced. How'd Marcus find out about this? He hired investigators earlier this year, as soon as your father died. Wanted to know if there was more money coming. Found the uncle, found his will. And Dorothy, you're in the will. You and Ruth are going to inherit approximately $180 million each. The world spun. $180 million. From an uncle I'd never met. Marcus knows this. He knows. And he was waiting for you to sign that clause before you found out. That way, he wouldn't have any legal claim to that inheritance either. The coldness that took over me in that moment was different from anything I'd ever felt. Marcus wasn't just trying to get rid of me. He'd been playing chess for months, trying to make sure I had no rights to anything of his while protecting his own position regarding my money. I want to meet my uncle, I said, before he dies. Before Marcus finds out, I know. Mrs. Hayes went quiet for a moment. I'll arrange it. But Dorothy, don't tell anyone, not even Ruth yet. If Marcus finds out, you know. I understand, I interrupted. He won't find out. A week later, I was on a plane to New York, telling everyone I was visiting an old school friend. Harold Washington lived in a penthouse in Manhattan. When I met him, I saw my father in him. The same eyes, the same sad smile. He was weak, consumed by cancer, but mentally sharp. Your father asked me to take care of you girls, he said, holding my hand with what little strength he had. He carried the guilt about you until his last day. We spent the afternoon talking. Harold told me stories about my father I'd never known, and for the first time, I could see him as human, flawed, not just as the man who abandoned us. As I was leaving, Harold held me back. I know you're getting divorced, and I know your husband found out about my inheritance. I froze. How do you know? He smiled. I've got my contacts, and Dorothy. There's something he doesn't know. I changed my will last week. Now you and Ruth are going to inherit not 180 but $240 million each, and 3 commercial properties in Manhattan worth another $150 million. But that's not in public records yet. Only my lawyer knows. And now you. I came back to Orangeburg with my head buzzing, almost $500 million. And Marcos had no idea. When I got home, there was a message from Lisa. "Mom, call me. It's urgent." I called. She answered crying, "Mom, Dad did something horrible. He tried to have you declared mentally incompetent. He filed a petition in court asking for mandatory psychiatric evaluation. He wants to commit you, Mom. If he succeeds, he can try to nullify everything, the agreement, even your control over the inheritance." My blood ran cold. Marcus had gone too far, way too far. I called Mrs. Hayes immediately. "I know," she said. "I just got notified. Dorothy, we need to act fast. The hearing's next week." The hearing was on a Monday morning. I got there early, dressed in a navy blue suit that Ruth helped me pick out. Mrs. Hayes was confident, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Marcus arrived with his lawyer and, surprisingly, Vanessa. She was dressed conservatively, trying to look like the concerned future wife. But when our eyes met, I saw fear in her face. The judge was Judge Martha Freeman, a black woman around 60. Known for being tough but fair. She read Marcus's petition carefully. "Mr. Johnson, you're asking the court to force your wife to undergo psychiatric evaluation based on what evidence exactly?" Marcus's lawyer presented witnesses, a doctor who said I'd stopped going to appointments, a neighbor who swore she saw me talking to myself. I was on the phone with earbuds. A bank employee who said I was confused. I was questioning improper fees. All grotesque distortions of the truth. Mrs. Hayes waited patiently. When her turn came, she was surgical. "Your Honor, Mrs. Johnson recently traveled to New York. Mr. Johnson presents this as erratic behavior, but she went to visit her uncle Harold Washington, who's in terminal stage cancer. Here's his letter confirming it, with medical records." Marcus's lawyer went pale. "And since we're talking about concerning behavior," Mrs. Hayes continued, distributing documents. "Here we have emails where Mr. Johnson conspires with his mistress to make his wife look mentally unstable. Here we have records of investigators hired to follow Mrs. Johnson. And here," she made a dramatic pause, "evidence that Mr. Johnson tried to bribe bank employees to obtain confidential information about her finances." The silence was absolute. Judge Freeman looked at Marcus with pure contempt. "Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to say?" Marcus tried to argue, but she cut him off. "Petition denied, and if you try any other stunt like this, I'll consider harassment charges." Then Vanessa stood up. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Everyone looked surprised. "I can't do this anymore." Marcus tried to pull her back, but she moved away, crying. "Marcus promised me marriage, but I found out he doesn't love me. He was only with me because I helped him hide money." The bomb dropped. Vanessa pulled documents from her purse. "Marcus has accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's been embezzling from the firm for years, using shell companies. He made me sign papers saying I was a partner, but it was just to hide his money. And now I found out he has another mistress, the new secretary. I'm just another idiot he used." Marcus turned red, yelling that she was lying, but Vanessa had already handed everything to the bailiff. Judge Freeman examined the documents with growing attention. "Mr. Johnson, we're talking about tax fraud, money laundering, concealment of assets. I'm referring this for federal criminal investigation. Officer, make sure he doesn't leave the jurisdiction." 3 months later, I was in Uncle Harold's lawyer's office in Charleston. He'd passed away 2 weeks earlier, peacefully. When the will was read, Ruth and I found out Harold had left not just the $240 million each, plus the properties, but also a charitable foundation with $100 million for us to help families of single mothers. Marcus was indicted on 9 federal crimes. The investigation discovered over $15 million embezzled. His partners sued him. Clients abandoned him. He lost everything. Vanessa made a deal with prosecutors and entered witness protection. The divorce was finalized in record time. I kept everything that was legally mine, and Marcus was left with debts and a criminal trial. He sent me a letter from jail. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. It said, "Dorothy, in the beginning, I really loved you. I don't know when I changed. I became someone unrecognizable. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." I tore it up and threw it in the trash. Those words didn't mean anything anymore. Today, a year later, I live in a beautiful house in Charleston, near the ocean. Ruth lives 2 blocks away. We see each other every day. David and Lisa visit me sometimes. Our relationship is rebuilding slowly, but they apologized for real. It's a start. I took over the foundation Harold left. Every day I help women in the situation my mother was in, abandoned, struggling alone. It's the most rewarding work of my life. At 66, I finally discovered who I am. Marcus is serving 15 years for fraud. He'll get out at 78, old and broken. I don't feel satisfaction or pity. I simply don't feel anything when I think about him. And that's true freedom. Yesterday, on the beach, a woman stopped me asking if I was Dorothy Johnson from the Washington Foundation. When I confirmed it, she cried and hugged me. "You guys saved me when my husband left me with 3 kids." It was in that moment I understood. My father abandoned me. My husband betrayed me. But all of that led me here, where I can transform my pain into healing for other women. That's my story. How at 65 I discovered I'd spent my life being invisible, and at 66 I learned to exist. It wasn't the ending I imagined at 25, but it's a much better ending. Because now, finally, I'm not someone's wife anymore, someone's mother. I'm simply Dorothy. And for the first time in my life, that's more than enough. Well, that was my story. The story of how, at 65, I discovered I'd spent 40 years being invisible, but found the strength to start over and become who I really am. And you, what did you think? Leave a comment down below telling me what you felt, if you related to it, or if you know someone who went through something similar. I read all the comments and love hearing what you guys think. If you enjoyed getting to know my story, hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel to follow other real stories like mine. By the way, the next story you're seeing on your screen right now is really moving too. Go check it out. I'm sure you'll connect with it as well. Sending love to all of you.